Jeremy Koerber, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
I'm looking forward to it. We are here where are we? What town are we in at the moment?
I think the whole thing is St. Louis, but I would have to guess we're somewhere in that realm between like Glendale and Kirkwood, I think.
Okay. All right. Here at Empire Fitness Academy, shout out to these guys for letting us use the studio space. It really makes it look like I have a plan or know what I'm doing when I'm in like a real studio space instead of, I've done this podcast everywhere. I've done it on picnic tables outside in, lawn chairs, all the way to like renting co-working spaces. You just got to make it work wherever you go. You know what I mean? But I feel like that's something that you're familiar with because that is almost like a core concept of hunting is just like make it work with whatever you're working with. Yeah.
I think there's a large part of the adapting to what you got type scenario. You can plan. I know you're new. You're getting into this, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you can plan as much as you want, and something's going to go wrong, such as life. It's the same thing. But, you expect a deer to come out one way, it comes the other. And if you haven't been out enough, you'll learn these things soon enough that whatever direction you think they're going to come, it's wrong. It's going to be behind you or to your left or, something along those
I've been
lines.
experiencing that already.
Yeah.
We've been, you guys have a great archery range in the South area, which is like the South County Archery Range. I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but it's in Jefferson Barracks Park. And I love anywhere that has like a good outdoor range. Like, I don't hate, but it's not my favorite to go to an indoor range and stand around just like shooting at the targets that are pre-measured and everything. Like I like to find a place where you can have a good walk through the woods and make that a part of it. And there's so many deer out there.
Oh yeah.
And I always feel like I'm looking and I'm like, all right, one's definitely going to be, in that thicket there. I feel like I'm seeing something. And then where I'm not looking, I turn and then there's a deer 5 feet from me, like in the other direction. It's like they just know where to materialize and that's what they do.
So, especially when you look out here and it's like, because we're closer to what we call West County, St. Louis, you get past that 270 corridor and suburban bow hunting is a real thing. I mean, it's a real thing everywhere, but I mean, it's like a big thing out here because there are so many deer. And I have to giggle because, we work with a lot of clients that are, outdoorsmen, hikers, whatnot, but we also work with your moms and your 5K runners and, people that are just trying to stay healthy. And you'll hear them say, well, the deer are destroying our flowers, or the deer. It's like the deer adapt. First off, the deer were here first before the subdivision came in. And I think a big myth is that if we blow these trees out, the deer will just go away. And the deer will actually start bedding down behind your swing set or your air conditioner. I mean, they learn to adapt. So, when you are talking about down at Jefferson Barracks specifically, those deer are very conditioned to human interference and intrusion, and they know where they're safe and where they're not.
Yeah.
And
it's so strange. Yeah, I mean, the first time I went out there, I was shooting on this one target, and I put 4 arrows into it, and I start walking down, and I get within 5 or 10 feet of the target, and I notice that someone has just stood up right next to me, and I'm like, wow, I didn't see, and there's 3 deer like laying around the target. It's gotten to the point where now I get like the binoculars out before I shoot at the target because I'm like, man, I feel like one of you is just going to walk right in front as I'm trying to take the shot. I would be in a ton of trouble.
Explain that to the ranger.
Someone walks up like, what were you doing? They walked in front of the target. I don't know. They'd have to have pretty solid evidence of that because they would definitely not believe that one. But yeah, I guess this is kind of a new topic on this podcast, so I need to give my listeners a little bit of backstory, if I may.
Sure.
So for the last little while here, I think people know that I've been into archery for quite a while now, shooting on the recurve and just having a great time with that. And because Andrea and I always talk about the healthy foods that we love eating, and we're always getting more and more into food, and I'm sure we'll talk some about that too, we made the decision that we want to try hunting. And the funny thing is, once we made that decision, it was like everything started to fall into place. We recognized like what hunting is, and it answered so many questions that we had sort of in our life. Like, why are we going to travel to this certain place? Or like, why do we want to be out in this type of nature? And now I think I'm almost starting to see it through the lens of like, well, because this animal lives there. And if we're there at the right time of year, we could go hunting for that animal. So we're starting in a way that I think is simple and familiar to a lot of bow hunters. That's the kind of hunting I think I'm likely to enjoy most. I like the idea of that challenge. we're starting in a way that I think is pretty familiar, which is we're going to Wisconsin with a friend who has bow hunted and has experience there, and we're going to be hunting whitetail this fall. And we've been putting all the pieces of that together. But I think, Andrea at first was like, we're rushing right into the most exciting part. And I was like, I think this is beginner. I think this is what you take kind of your kid when they are a teenager and they're starting to get into it. I think this is where you take them bow hunting, right? I mean, this is like a first step in a way, right?
I think so. I mean, and I'm excited for you for all of the things that you just talked about. So when I was a kid, I remember vividly. Now I'm not sure what age I was. I'm guessing maybe 6, 7, and this wasn't even a hunting trip. But I remember watching my grandfather and my uncle load up the back of a pickup truck. They actually were going trout fishing. But I mean, it's kind of like what you would have imagined back in the late 70s, early 80s. Old pickup truck, camper shell, sleeping bags. I mean, it was drawing me, and I was devastated when they said, no, you can't go.
Oh, Yeah. How old were you at the time?
7, 8, somewhere in that ballpark range. Yeah. So, you fast forward and, we start small game hunting. Squirrels, rabbits, they're training me more or less to learn how to handle a weapon. Let's just fast forward to the deer hunting side of it, because it's so interesting. Because right now, my oldest son's 15, my youngest is 12. And there's different phases of the hunter, if you will. Now, how old are you?
I'm so excited for this.
How old are you?
I'm 26.
You're 26, okay. So
I want the phases.
Yeah. There's the killing phase.
Okay.
And what that means is that you are out there with someone who's a mentor to you, my grandfather, my hero, if you want to call it that, and you want to tag a deer to show I did this. Okay? And that's kind of that phase. And younger hunters will go through that. Then you will go through what's called the trophy phase. The trophy phase of hunting gets a bad rap because it's like a smoke and mirrors type thing when people who are not fans of hunting talk about it. If you're going after a trophy whitetail, let's talk about this for a second. That whitetail is probably in that 4 to 5 year old range. The average age of a whitetail in the wild is about 1.5. So it has lived free, foraging on wild things, not in a pen, not fed antibiotic, nothing along those lines. It's made baby deer. It's been free its entire life, and it had one bad day, if you understand what I mean.
100%, okay? Yeah.
That's kind of the trophy phase. And like I said, you're going after a mature animal, which I would make the argument that that's what we all should be doing for that reason alone. Then you go into, and I think this is kind of where I'm starting to go, because I'll be 46 next week. This is where you're starting to kind of transition into, and I'm not sure if I have a name for it, but that phase where I can go hunting. I know I'm going to go out this year and I'm going to harvest deer for food, feed the family. Mm-hmm. But now it's about taking guys like you out, teaching my sons how you do this the right way. Now, they started with rifle because drawing a bow is a whole lot more complex than what, aiming a rifle and going that route would be. However, I tagged a great deer last year. It was the best deer of my life. And if I get the opportunity to do it again this year, I will. But I'm more stoked to take my son Jack, my son Justin. They are now, Jack's into bow hunting. Justin will probably use a crossbow. My wife Beth, taking them out and helping them learn to have success.
Right.
His friends, he's got a couple friends that he wants to take out there. This is what this is about. Is you go through these phases, and ultimately. I love the fact that I can walk out in my garage, open up the chest freezer, and it's full. It's full of protein. It's awesome. Those are the things that I think maybe are not portrayed enough in media that need to be. So the opportunities like this to talk about your story or what we do or why we do it, I think is critical because, like I tell my sons, there are. In every walk of life, there's people that are going to do bad things. There's people that are going to do things that are without integrity. And I said, this stuff right here will teach you a lot about who you are and what you do, because what we want to do, especially with what I do with my company, is we want to portray the outdoorsman in the most positive light possible. Because I don't care if you are a meat eater, if you're vegetarian, that part doesn't matter. What does matter is that if you're sitting here today, it's because of hunting. Because if people didn't hunt, we would not be here as we sit here today as modern humans. So I always look at it as it's a connection to nature. On my farm in northern Missouri, I cannot tell you the amount of hours that I've spent improving habitat, the amount of dollars. For the few deer that we will take off of that, how many more critters, if you will, from your white-tailed deer down to your turkeys, to your raccoons, to your possums and skunks. What have we done for that up there when you drive around, especially a place like St. Louis, and they're knocking down, patches of timber to put up more houses? That's the part of this that I love in my phase right now more than anything, is the giving back. It is the connection. It's knowing where my food comes from, and hopefully taking these lessons, these outdoor morals, if you will, instilling them in my kids, and really anyone else that wants to come along for the ride is kind of where we're sitting at.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds like a cool phase. I mean, and you're right. It's somewhere I want to be, and I'm probably somewhere in between all those things. It's a different journey for everybody, but you're right on in sort of the concept of like, how can we portray this in like in a great way to really show people what this is? Because to me, I had heard some portrayals of hunting through my whole life. It's not something I grew up doing at all. And so I've had to, I don't know what I'm the adult learner in this. You know what I mean? I'm old enough to be stuck in some of my ways, and young enough that I feel like I can still learn some new things. But the more I have learned about it, the more into it I have become. And I think that that's a really good sign of anything that's worth doing, is like the deeper you go, it seems like the more you actually really want to do. This year, recently, Andrea, when did your documentary come out? March. Okay, so we just released Andrea's first ever documentary. It's a feature-length movie of our first year living on the road. And so we've been doing a vlog since then, and sort of as a part of that. And the next project that we're going to be doing is going to be about us getting into the world of hunting. And so that's kind of the next like entire phase that we're getting into, which we're really excited about. The vlog about traveling is still going to be a thing, but we're really looking forward to making the hunting a thing. So she is going to be coming with me with her camera setup, and literally every day we've been out there practicing, like, what am I doing and what do I need to focus on, and what camera setup do you need so that you are quiet and able to do this. And we've just been, it's been like every day we've just been working on this thing, and we're starting to get there so that we can have really great footage of the actual hunt itself too, not just a GoPro mounted on a head. We're hoping to have some really nice stuff for people to look at. But I feel like the big change that we've noticed is that I've noticed personally. I've always loved animals, but like I haven't felt a real connection to animals. I'm sure a lot of people feel that same way. I didn't have pets really growing up. I like animals. I'm very nice to animals, and people should know that. But like, I wouldn't, if I saw a deer walking by, I'd probably just go, "That's a deer," And
Right.
Lately, I've been a very different person, because when we're out there on that archery range and a bunch of deer go by, I'm like staring at them. I'm like, "What do you do? What are you all about?" And all of a sudden I find myself really caring about like just the habits of a deer, and not just that, but then I'll see like a squirrel and I'm like, "What do you do? I'm curious about you now too." And now I've got really cool binoculars that I need, and I'm like, I want an excuse to use these binoculars, and now I'm looking at birds. Like, what do you guys? What's your story? And I feel like the love of animals and the love of hunting and the fact that they're coming together is kind of an interesting thing. And I don't know that people get that unless they can kind of get some more information and understand what hunting is really all about. But it's an odd connection, right? Like caring for animals, and also I'm going to hunt them. And I think every hunter struggles with this.
It is probably the number one paradox when you're sitting there talking to a non-hunter, or maybe someone that disagrees with you completely. How can you profess to care about the same things that you're trying to kill? And I think that when you come down to it, I think there's maybe 2 or 3 ways of explaining this. First and foremost, I did a blog for Drury Outdoors about a month ago, and this is a true story. So I was heading to a meeting. This happened early June. I was heading to a meeting, and I know you all are familiar with St. Louis, but for your listeners, I was turning off onto I-270, which is a very well-known and very busy highway that connects pretty much everything around St. Louis. And it's about 9:30 or 10 o'clock in the morning. So rush hour is starting to die, but there's still quite a few cars there. So I get off, I'm getting into the second lane, I'm accelerating, and I look up, and in the in the third lane of traffic is a white-tailed fawn. Now, you're not supposed to swerve to miss deer. That's a cardinal rule, but instinctively, I swerve. And I missed the deer. Look in the rearview mirror just in time to see the deer get clipped. It got back up, and it ran then to the median. Now, understand, this is an awful story, and I'm telling this for a reason. As I'm driving northbound, I'm watching this fawn, because there's no way this fawn can go. It's up against the concrete wall, and it was like an ocean swallowing a drowning victim at that point. There are too many deer out here, okay? And so for every person that says, we shouldn't have suburban hunting or we shouldn't hunt at all, my rebuttal to that is there are no natural predators, especially in the suburban area, except for BMWs and SUVs. That's really what's going to happen there. It was awful, okay? So you've got that aspect right there. Population control. When populations are out of control, either in suburbia or the wild, in suburbia you have situations like what I just saw. In the wild, you have disease or starvation. And let's put it in terms like this. There is no good death in nature.
Yeah.
No one just falls asleep and, like we see, like we hope to in that sense. It's pretty awful.
Right. And most things will eat you before you're dead.
Exactly. Right. The other argument or parallel that I will make when someone says, how can you care so much and yet do that? And what it comes down to is I look at myself as taking the middleman out of the equation, because I don't think anybody thinks for a second when they go into the grocery store and they pick up pork chops or chicken breasts or even fish. And the way I look at it is something had to give up its life in order for you to have that barbecue this afternoon. Whatever your fancy, doesn't matter. So what I enjoy is the connection to the process of going out and getting our own food. Do we eat beef? Absolutely. I'm actually raised on a farm in southern Missouri, so the protein that we get either comes from that farm or what we harvest in nature, aside from fish or salmon or chicken for that matter. So I think there's that. The third aspect, especially when they find out that I have a farm and I really am into conservation and habitat improvements, is that there has to be a healthy balance across the board. And a great example of this would be the decline of the wild turkey, really nationwide, but across Missouri. And there's really three factors to that. Number one, turkeys really need the right kind of weather to have a good hatch. In the last few years in Missouri, it's been cold, it's been wet, it's been rainy, it hasn't worked. But the second aspect to it, habitat's being destroyed, again, even in rural areas, large tracts of land being developed into subdivisions, they got to go somewhere. Mm-hmm. And when they don't have nesting habitat, they cannot reproduce, and they may have poults, but the poults won't survive. The third is balancing nature. And this is also another conversation that people look at and say, you do what? But now that fur prices are no longer what fur prices were, people don't trap anymore. People do not, coon hunting used to be a real thing. You had dogs, and people still do it from a traditional standpoint, but raccoons, skunks, possums are all nest-raiding predators. And what that means is if they can find a turkey nest, they will eat every single egg that's out there. Now, every critter's got to eat. A coyote has to eat. Bobcat has to eat. But when you get nature that's out of balance, so, the reason we trap on our property isn't to be merciless killers. It's to get that raccoon population back in check. And in less than a year, we've gone from like 2 or 3 turkeys on the farm. I took a video the other day. There were 13 birds standing in the road when we pulled up, and that's just in a year. Mm-hmm. Taking a few predators off that allowed the hens to actually raise a clutch, and that's what's going to ultimately, some of those turkeys, they'll die this winter. It's cold. A predator will get them. That's nature. That's what's supposed to happen. So when I take a deer or 2 or 3, Believe me when I say it's calculated. So when we go up to the farm, we will look at what I call it the inventory. So when we're up there hunting, if I'm seeing, a field full of does, that's out of balance. For a healthy deer herd, it should be almost a 1-to-1 ratio buck to doe. So what I will do at that point is last year we took 2 deer off the farm, 2 does and a buck. This year, because habitat's different and there's a lot more food up there, because when I bought the farm, it was just timber and weeds now, and it draws deer in. Now we're going to have to say, okay, how many deer do we need to take off this to balance it? Because last year they ate every bit of food. I mean, it was down to bare dirt up there. What do we do? And then how do we, tying back to what we talked about earlier, help guys like you or girls or whatever to learn that experience of what it feels like to harvest their own food. Right. So I try. My mind races. If you haven't figured that already, I go so many different directions because what I try to do is to maximize every single aspect of what I do. Yeah. So if I can take a young person up there, not just to kill an animal, but to teach them what it feels like to harvest their own food, or what it feels like to sit there in cold, wet, rainy conditions and have the perseverance or the resilience to wait out, because those animals are way better at sitting that stuff out than what we are. To teach them how to read a track, or if you do hit an animal, again, you're going to learn this when you go to Wisconsin, how to blood trail. Was it a good hit? Was it a bad hit? Well, what color is that blood? Does it have a smell to it? You're going to learn all these things, and you're going to know, do I go after that animal right now, or do I go back to the house and wait 2 or 3 hours because I hit it a little further back. That's a liver hit. It's going to need 6 to 8 hours. Those are the things that you can't teach in a weekend course. It's years and years and years. You strike me as the type of individual that's going to pour yourself into something like this. And I think that what you're going to find is that it's frustrating, it's rewarding, it's amazing. And as much as you here I get back to the loving the animals part. Sorry, I'm running down a rabbit hole.
No, you're doing fine. It's all fascinating.
Here's the aspect of the loving the animal thing. When I look at trail cam pictures right now, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a fawn. Oh, that's a doe. Yeah. At the moment that and you'll know this, a primal wave will take over you, and you will feel like you are a bobcat or a cougar, and you'll know. And I hope you text me at that point in time and be like, you were right. Now, whether you harvest it, whether you miss, whatnot, maybe you got the shakes and you blew the arrow right over its back, who knows? But you will have that moment where something in the universe is telling you, take that animal. And it's pretty cool. I don't do that. It's not like I sit there. I will go out and sit and watch deer. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to shoot that deer today. It's too hot. It's too cold. I don't feel like doing it. I'm just going to watch them today. And then there is a moment every year where that same doe that I might have watched 3 weeks in a row, I harvest her. And I can't explain it, but that's it. And then I go right back to habitat and loving those animals all over again.
You've opened so many doors of different things I want to talk about, and I'm attempting mentally to bookmark all of them because they're all so great. I think that there is, if I can meta up one level, it's so interesting when people are talking about hunting to me as someone who didn't grow up with that information. And what you see is that there is so much information and education to be had about hunting, and so much of it that is, I don't know if it's being lost, but it's certainly not being passed down in numbers that in previous generations or for hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of years that it was being passed down. And once you start to engage in that information, it changes your mindset, and all of a sudden you start to understand things about yourself that you didn't understand before. And I think that most hunters who have this knowledge, it's like you said, like you go in all these directions because there's just an outpouring of all this information, and you recognize that once someone hears it, there's no convincing to be done. If you can teach someone these things, the argument is already made. They will already understand so many things about themselves and their own nature and what it means to go hunting. And a lot of the common reasons that people are uncomfortable with hunting just disappear in the face of that education. And it's so interesting. But yeah, I mean, for me, this has been, it's somewhere between, you know what it is? It's like using obsession as a means to back up what I feel is a great responsibility when I go out there. So the fact is, I recognize that I can't control every element of what will happen out there on any hunt that I may go on, but I know that I can control waking up every morning and getting out to that range. And I know that it respects those animals more every time that I go. If I'm out there for 2 hours, I just respected that animal double if I was out there for 1 hour, because I have a much better chance of placing a correct shot and an ethical shot and having more patience for it. And so, but there's so much that goes into this, But, I imagine your hunter's ed was probably a little while ago, but since you've got kids, you may have seen some of their hunter's ed stuff. Have they taken like the online courses at all?
It's a great question, and I'm actually getting ready because I'm going to date myself here. I probably took my hunter education course back in the middle 80s. Okay.
I don't think they had the online course.
No, there was no online back then.
You probably had to actually talk to a person and engage
people.
with other people. And
Jack actually, so if you're under 16 in Missouri, you actually have to go to a class.
Oh, okay.
And take it. Okay. Now my wife, over a certain age, you can take it online.
Yeah.
I'm getting ready to do the bow hunter education because a lot of municipalities, you've got your state one, but they want you to have a bow hunter one too.
Yeah.
Just to, that extra added.
I think there's a couple states where you have to. Like I know you have to in Alaska and Montana and one other place that I can't remember.
Right.
You have to do the specific bow hunting one. But I just took those courses, and I took both. I took the traditional hunter's ed, and then I took the bow hunting one also. And the initial one, or the just basic hunter's ed, it's great. All the information is great. It was a ton of gun stuff, frankly. It was a lot of gun stuff for a bow guy. I'm like, all right. But the nice thing is I have access to it forever. So when it matters, I can come back and get all that again. But I learned it all, But they do a really good job of distilling down all this information. Like it's really actually incredible how much I was able to learn, not only about going and hunting and keeping yourself safe, but also like where to place ethical shots and when to take the shot and not take the shot, where all of the funding for the outdoors comes from, and land conservation and what all of this means. I honestly was kind of blown away by how well they've been able to condense that information for me to take it in. I don't know, it was probably like 10 hours overall of coursework.
Sure.
I would guess. It's a lot of information.
It is.
They do it well.
It is.
They do it well. Shout out to, huntersed.com or, whoever produced those courses. Those are great. But it's all the things that you're talking about too. It's knowing when to take that shot and when do you follow, that animal at risk of bumping it or not. And so I feel like, honestly, if there was some version of that for everyone to take, even anybody who enjoys the outside or goes hiking or anything, even just to make sure they can be safe around other hunters, if they started to see some of that information, I think minds would be changed much quicker about hunting, because that's all it takes. It's just information, education, and all of a sudden, kind of get it.
It does. And I think, most, I shouldn't say most, but every year, whether it's Missouri or another place, you will hear of a hunting-related accident, okay? Most of the time, I shouldn't say most of the time, but you'll read the stories, it was self-inflicted. Someone left a gun loaded and, they shot their foot or something along those lines. We had one that happened here in Missouri in turkey season where someone shot. They were hunting public land, and they shot at movement. And those are awful. I mean, those are the things that you take these courses not to. And that's also kind of a mental training game, like with my kids even. We still hunt with them for the reason of if they get super excited, you hear something, you see something, and you're trained, because I'm always blown away at how someone's turkey hunting and there's an accident. I'm like, how do you mistake a human being for a wild
especially
turkey?
when it's people who've been hunting for like 30 years,
But pressure, meaning that I really want this animal, or inexperience, excitement, all of those things come to fruition right there. So I think the thing I'm trying to make though is, with all of that being said, the advent of these programs that are teaching how to do it the right way has reduced those numbers. I don't think if you were going to go back and look at it historically, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I think you would see that because of Twitter and Facebook, these stories are pushed a lot faster now, whereas we probably are having fewer hunting-related incidents than we ever have because of what you just described right there.
Well, it's almost one of those places where I rarely think it's good to centralize information. This might be one of those cases, because we've taken all the experiences from all over the country and all over the world and put them into one course and said, this is actually what's really happening and what you need to avoid and be looking out for, as opposed to, I imagine there was a time with Hunter's Ed where it's not necessarily a centralized education. You kind of learn it from someone who's got their own bias and their own opinions on it. And it's like, you don't need to worry about this part. We're going to skip that. Like any in-person education, it's, the online course, you can't skip a page.
Right.
And I think they time you on how long you're on each page, in fact. So
I think there
not
was
missing
also,
stuff.
for me, and I did this with my own kids, and it's kind of one of those, hey, we're going to have fun with an incredible lesson to it. So when I was 13, my grandfather bought me a Remington 870 Wingmaster 20 gauge. Okay, I've got that gun to this day. My son's using it now. And we went out and he filled up, I want to say it was in like plastic, barns and tractors, and it looked like an old oil jug. Filled it with water, stepped off about 20 yards and said, shoot it. And I shot it, and that thing exploded. Water went everywhere. I mean, it just shot, and he was like, oh, that's awesome. And he goes, all right, come here. So we walk over to it, and the jug's laying on the ground, and he turns it over, and the entire backside of that jug is gone. And he told me, you see what I'm talking about, son? And instantly I knew exactly what it was. That could be a person right there. And once you pull that trigger, you can't take it back. So that is, you do it with a pumpkin. You do all kinds of things, because the kids are going to look at it and go, this is great. But then the lesson comes, all right? Because if that safety's not on, if you get excited, if you do this, accidents happen. But accidents like this is going to cost you or someone you love or care about your life. So we have had those conversations from the very beginning, with the first Red Ryder BB gun. If you don't carry it the right way or you point it at someone, guess what? It's gone. Also, we have a little rule, and thankfully I've never had to prepare this, but I said if you kill it, you eat it. So if you shoot a sparrow out of a nest, guess what we're getting ready to do tonight? Not me, you.
One. Yeah.
So, when we're on the farm and they say, I'm going to go shoot this, I'm like, then be prepared. You go kill that snake, be prepared,
right.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
So luckily that lesson has been good because I haven't had to,
It's never been.
I've never had to do that,
Okay,
but yeah,
good.
we do have that conversation.
I don't think you have
basis.
to eat. I think just they have to.
Well, I don't have to eat. I'm just like, I don't want to skin a snake out.
No,
I mean, I guess
yeah.
I could, but
Well, I think they should have to do that part too.
Yeah. But at any rate, no. I mean, I think there's a lot of practical, hands-on, dad, grandpa, mentor type lessons that need to be had, and then you can take that experience. Because I remember when I went into the hunter education, you watched it online. I had a little paper book. So, especially we're going to go dove hunting in a little over a week. And so when I'm sitting out there, if you remember, there's different lanes that you're supposed to stay in,
Mm-hmm.
okay? You're here to
Like a
here.
45 degree.
Right. Same thing with duck hunting. And I actually took my son duck hunting for the first time this last fall. And, I mean, that's a whole nother experience because you're in a blind, and it's like learning the etiquette. Every hunting quarry that you're going to go after, there's a slightly different etiquette to it based upon what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important because, that gun safety is absolutely paramount. It doesn't matter if you kill something, if you're brandishing or carrying your weapon in a manner that's unsafe, or you're not sure how the safety works, if you're not sure how to properly operate. I mean, that's a big thing too, as far as like a bolt action rifle. So, all those things that we've done that were done for me, I'm trying to do the exact same thing. And like even with my wife, so my wife tagged her first deer before she had her hunter education. So Beth was 43 when she shot her first deer. And so what the Missouri Department of Conservation has is that you can do what's called a 2-year apprenticeship where you don't have to get your hunter ed certification so long as you're in the presence of a licensed hunter, a mentor, kind of like your permit drivers, same type thing. So she had the opportunity to go out and find out if she liked it, and she did. So she, I think it was last summer, got online, took her hunter ed, and now she's good to go as well. So I think there's a lot to keeping this tradition alive, and I do look at it. I don't think it's as a lot of times in outdoor media you hear that this tradition is being lost, and I think in some ways it is. I don't think it's as lost as what a lot of people want to portray it is, because when I'm going to the woods, I'm seeing an awful lot of people in pickups parked on the side of the road. If that were the case, we wouldn't be seeing this. However, I feel a obligation to make sure that my boys and whoever I have the ability to influence understands that they do it the right way. Because, if you look at a code book of rules and regulations, it can be a little bit daunting. But, and even then, there's 1 or 2 conservation agents for an entire county, okay? What I'm about to say is if you did something, it's kind of like calling on yourself in golf. It's on you.
Right.
Now, I despise poachers. That's stealing, road hunters. I mean, what we're trying to do and teach is it doesn't matter if that conservation agent is 45 miles from where you are right now. What matters is you do this the right way because God knows, that's who knows right now. So it's on you to do it right because at some point you're going to take someone else with you. And whether you're on a trout stream and you've got your limit of 5, you're going to slip another one on that stringer? No, because that's how it's supposed to work. Those are the rules.
Yeah.
You are in charge of making sure that the image of what we do and how it's portrayed, because it doesn't matter if you've got, and this goes without anything, 10 people will have a great experience, but that one person that goes to a restaurant and has a bad experience, 100 people are going to hear about that. Whereas the 10 good experiences, and it's the same thing. And it goes back to the same thing with the hunting-related accidents. No one's hearing about all the good stuff that's happening. It's the bad stuff that they want to jump on. So I think it's important for me, as you're getting into this, that the people that you're talking to in your travels and that you're leading, I mean, especially because you're in the media, I'm in outdoor media. I mean, the eyes are on us. So there's an added pressure at that point in time to make sure that you're doing everything the right way. And it's a burden, but it's also a wonderful privilege at the same time.
It's an opportunity.
There's
a lot of, there is a lot of sort of the ethics versus legality that happens. And I think, now I'm going on a tangent of just different things I think about the world, which is, that a lot of people will not ever choose to behave ethically if they can have a legal reason to not. So what we do is try to, use legality to root out all forms of evil instead of recognizing that there's a lot of individual responsibility to not being evil and not doing unethical things. And, to me, it goes back again to just like preparation for this hunt. Like, I think it would be unethical for me to not learn everything I can before I go out there. I think that is it's really the only ethical thing I can do in preparation, is to make sure that I'm reading the books and doing the practice. But the nice thing is there is so much information out there that is really useful. I mean, of course, one of the big things is everybody loves Meat Eater. I think everybody loves Meat Eater.
Yeah.
And so, of course, we love Steve Rinella, and I've been listening to his podcast, and I've read his book, and I've just taken in all that information. So you can have the books, you can take in all of that stuff, and then you can be practicing and trying to learn. And there's so many resources on YouTube, and it's, individuals like yourself who are teaching some of these components, and it almost becomes like, are you really going to pretend like you couldn't have had the information? Because of course you could. You have access to all this great information. It would just be laziness that would stop you from sort of doing that. And to me, that is like, that laziness is a form of not being ethical and not being responsible to that animal. So I don't know. I feel like it's on everybody to get themselves fit to hunt, if you will.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, tell me about your thing. So
That's
fit to
hunt.
hunt.
I like that. Yeah.
Well, we're really into fitness, and we have been for like a long time, and we're a little probably completely over the top about it. One of the big things that we do is we really do not eat at restaurants anymore. We really have, it's a rare thing. It's like something with a family member or something. I mean, it's really become a commitment for us that like every night we're cooking. The next step that we've taken recently is, first thing was we started buying better meat. So we started looking at organ meats and learning some things about organ meats, and we've always been buying like grass-fed beef and stuff like that, but then we were like, can we go better? And Andrea found this, what's the company called? Force of Nature?
Okay.
Force of Nature. It's a company that is kind of, I don't know, they're kind of leading the way in mixing in organ meats with their meat products, and they'll ship them to you in like
Yeah.
2 days. And we've just been packing our freezer with that. And I'm so excited for that next step of
Yeah.
like not just organ meats and, good food, but like food that we harvested in the
Right.
freezer.
Right.
It's such an exciting thing. But it's almost like getting fit to hunt sort of will propel you to continue, because you're going to have such great meat to eat after that point, and to stay in good shape and to recover. And so like, but you're already in that spiral already. Like you already do that, which is so cool. You've got the health benefits of all the wild game mixed in with all that you know about fitness. This is a very long introduction and way of saying, tell me about Fit to Hunt, because I think it's really cool how you're combining those two things.
So being in the fitness industry, and I always have to think about this now because I think I'm in my 25th year of doing this. I would say, and honestly, it's funny that you mentioned Stephen Ranella, because, in his earlier shows, that's where I started to really get the idea of combining my passion for the outdoors with the fitness aspects that I was already teaching and training other people. And then, to take it a step further, I guess this is serendipity, maybe I think it's the right word, with 18 Strong. We're in their podcast studio right now. So the idea came from both watching and seeing a trend in the outdoor industry, because if you're going to go on a Western hunt, you need to prepare physically for that. And as I've evolved in this company, for whitetail, for turkey, for duck, I've trained people for all of these things, and I could make very long arguments as to why this is going to make you better, and not just better, but also from a longevity standpoint. I don't just want to go on the hunt of a lifetime. I want to hunt for a lifetime. And so, having clients, well, the oldest person I ever trained, he wasn't a hunter, but he was 96 years old. I mean,
Wow.
Be able to have, to do these things long term. But the reason I want to point out 18 Strong is that was kind of the thing that tipped me over to say, I'm going to do this, because Jeff trains golfers. Okay, that's what he does. And so if you go to the doctor and the doctor says, man, blood sugar's getting up there, cholesterol's a little high, I need you to lose 30 pounds. And I've seen this over the course of 25 years. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
Okay?
I know where you're going. I'm excited about it.
What he was doing with his golfers was, hey, you wanna hit that ball 20 yards past your buddy? Here's what we're going to do. And so he was getting them to exercise for a passion that they loved. No one gets excited about losing 30 pounds to let their blood sugar get better. But to go on an elk hunt in New Mexico with the opportunity to tag a monster bull, that's a different animal. And so he actually helped inspire really the premise behind this, because at the end of the day, and the other thing that I teach, if you watch our social long enough, you're going to figure this out, is that we aren't focusing just on fitness. It's not just about how many push-ups you can do and how many apples you eat, but we look at the entire spectrum of wellness: financial, relationships, spiritual, environmental, occupational, educational. Because if you're out of balance in any one of those things, think about that for a second. If you are, you may be in fantastic shape, but if you have a horrible relationship with your spouse, you're not going to be doing all the things that you need to do. If you can't stand your job, or you're so stressed that it's preventing you from exercising, we could go through parallels all day long. So what you're going to see, and that's also the difference, is why we call ourselves coaches versus just trainers. Any trainer can put together a program and say, do this, do that, eat here. That's great. What we want to do is to help people navigate those minefields, and a lot of times they don't even realize we're doing it until all of a sudden, the relationships are better. I'm fitter. I've lost that weight, and I moved on. So that's kind of the genesis, if you will, or the overall philosophies to it. What we try and do, and we've talked about it a little bit already, is to be a very positive, uplifting place. I feel like the community is growing. It's not quite like the voraciousness of, say, the CrossFit community, if you will.
Oh,
I mean, God, I'd love it to be that way.
You guys don't have your own Olympics just yet. But
not yet. But,
they really do. Have you seen those?
I know, it's
the
crazy.
CrossFit Games, man, a ton of people show up to that.
Right.
Stadiums packed full of people.
Right.
To watch someone just lift one weight.
Which
is fun. I think it's fun. I've had a CrossFit athlete on my podcast, actually, but yeah, it's different.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're talking about is like fitness for just general fitness is such a loose concept.
Right.
It's so hard for most people. But fitness for a sport, that's been super core for me lately too. Like my other passion is jujitsu, and as soon as I started, I would still be like training with a kettlebell or running. As soon as I said, what if when I'm training with the kettlebell, I did it in 5-minute rounds, just like I roll in jujitsu, and so I know I go as hard as I can for 5 minutes, and I get to recover for 1 minute, and something clicked, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm actually preparing for jujitsu all of a sudden.
Yep.
It's a different feeling.
It's a totally different feeling, and the fun aspects. We have clients all over the United States and even into Canada. So for the guys that are training for upcoming elk season, the conversations we're having, and we do in person here in St. Louis, but everything else is remote. So we're training people over the internet is what we're doing. Tell me how your hikes are going. Tell me how your shooting sessions are going. Are you feeling pain in the shoulder? Are you doing this? And we make adjustments accordingly. For our whitetail hunters, that's a different animal because arguably the hardest or the most physically demanding time for a whitetail hunter has been really from about June until now, because you're putting in food plots, you're cutting down trees, you're hanging stands. It's hot. And so I think most people think, well, I need to be fit to go hunt a deer for. I'm just going to go sit in a stand. Well, no, there's other aspects to this. The scouting, okay? If you use a climbing stand, all of those things. And then let's take another little transition to where it's 20 degrees with a wind chill, and now there's a mental aspect to this. We're training you to be able to sit in that stand. Duck hunters, I love this because if you've ever done a public land duck hunt, it's awful. It's hard. I mean, you're dragging your stuff in, you're dragging it out. It's a mess. To have these I call them outdoor athletes in their 50s, like, I can blow through the marsh, I can do this. But my other buddies are 100 yards behind, they're sucking wind, and I can do this. Now that guy is hooked and has dropped 20, 30 pounds. He's changed his nutrition, and it's an evolution. But to watch these people do this stuff and really buy into the premise has been such a gift. And then to watch the community grow, I mean, man, you may have your own workout plan, and that's cool. When I go online and I see someone wearing a shirt and they're in wherever, we just shipped one to, I think it was Winnipeg, a couple weeks ago. That's awesome, because whatever we're doing, whether it's through our social media content or our blogs or our YouTube channel, we've resonated with that person enough or given them something of value that says, I want to wear that hat, or I'm going to wear that T-shirt, or put that sticker on the back of my car. A lot of ways that means more to me than, because I can't, there's only so many people I can train, but if we can influence and encourage, and like we talked about earlier, by the way that we handle ourselves and conduct our own business, we're spreading those vibes out there. That's ultimately what we want to do. At the end of the day, if this company becomes something that is what I do, just all day, every day, full time, that's awesome. If it continues to be what it is and we continue just to impact people in a part-time virtual type world, well, that's okay too, because what I'm seeing, and again, it's hard to put into words at times, but when you impact someone and they send you that thank you note, or they call you and say, wow, this is where I was and here's where I am now, that's really the driving force behind what myself and our team is striving to do. Mm-hmm. We want to be relevant. We want to be that household name, but at the end of the day, wherever this journey takes us, we're impacting the people that we've been blessed to impact. And develop those relationships. And that's ultimately what this is going to, from a legacy perspective, that's what it's going to be.
Well, I think it's similar to the legacy perspective you have on hunting, too, because you're impacting whether or not someone has a good time hunting. One of the things that I have taken away from a lot of advice is that the comfortable hunter out there is the one that stays longer and is likely to be more successful. And I think that's part of what you're doing is you're allowing someone to probably go have a hunt that they enjoy because they've been sleeping, they're in shape for it, They're happier. One of the things I struggle most with, because we are such minimalists, is buying all of the right gear.
Sure.
It's a massive undertaking to get even just the right clothes. And every time I have to think like, okay, but I know that if I have the good coat, I will stay longer. We will be more likely to be successful. I'll be more likely to be in good state of mind when I have to take the shot. And so you go ahead and make that investment. And I think that it's the same thing with fitness. Luckily for me, that's not something that bothers me because I like fitness already.
Right.
But if it was, what you're drawing the line between is someone who goes out and has just a terrible time because it's way too physically demanding for where they're at,
Right.
and someone who goes out and has a great time because they can totally handle it. And it's just, it's night and day. And then, when it comes to fitness with hunting, I think it's always good when your family and your community are behind the thing that you're into. And so if they see someone out there, like if your wife sees you going out every year, but all of a sudden you're getting in shape from hunting or for hunting, I mean, she's going to be far more in support of that. And I think she'll be like, yeah, go out there and get after it. And so will your friends, and so will your doctor, whatever it is that drives you. If you can turn that into health, I think that's all you got to do.
I'll tell you something that's also interesting, and it was actually a client of mine that pointed this out, and he's a hunter, but he called me up one day. He's like, hey, I'm going to take a step back on the amount of hunting I'm doing this year, and he started listing out goals, family, some business goals along the way, and we were talking, and I was like, hey, man, are you sure? Because you really like hunting. And he stopped me, and he goes, there's other things to hunt in this world besides game. And so it changed that perspective. So we've got people who work with us that are not outdoorsmen, because if you want to get down to the brass tacks here, we're all hunting something. And so whether it is, an advanced degree or, an award-winning documentary or whatever the case might be,
She deserves one.
She does deserve one. She did a great job of setup in here today. I feel like it doesn't matter if you're into bow hunting or fishing. That part is irrelevant. If we can train you using the philosophies and the belief systems that we have and help you in your life become better at whatever it is that you're after, then we've done our job as well. Because the hunting world, there's plenty, and that's one of the reasons why we're online. I don't know that the business would be able to be as strong as it is if we just focused on St. Louis. There's a lot of hunters around here, but we had to expand what we do right there. So the beauty of this is that once we start to get that message out there, it's funny that we train. I've got this morning 6 a.m. And I've trained her now for, believe it or not, 22 years. The same person. Every Monday and Wednesday morning at 6 a.m., she will turn 76 in October. And she golfs, she volunteers, she's active, she's healthy, she takes no medication. I'm like, that's the life right there.
Right.
That's what we're trying to do for not just the outdoorsman, but every person along the way. So it's cool.
Well, there's so much that there's so much of hunting that really speaks to sort of our own just our own species and what we're really supposed to do, that I think connects with what you're saying. The latest thing in our household has been sort of an obsession with the carnivore diet. Are you familiar? Great book. Paul Saladino is a medical doctor, and he wrote this great book called The Carnivore Code, which we are both working our way through right now.
Yeah.
But we've heard a lot of other information from a lot of other people, and he is making. I'm in the section of the book now where he's making some really compelling arguments about just what the human body is meant to do.
Yeah.
Why are the sclera is that the right way to say it, of our eyes white? What does that mean? It means that you can tell which direction I'm looking, so we can sort of silently communicate about what we're hunting. Or why do we have shoulders that can throw things really fast? No other animal really has that.
Right.
No other animals can hunt every other animal. Like, they have very specific species they can hunt. It's totally fascinating. And I feel like it would almost be empty reading this book without also having the hunting journey on my mind.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, oh wow, that's really what we're supposed to be out there doing. But I think that there is a tendency for us to, whether it's ignore part of who we are, or whether it's just that there are things about us that do not fit into this modern mold of life, that hunting answers so many questions.
Yeah.
Because you really are not meant to sit in that desk chair for 8 hours a day for 40
No.
hours a week. There's nothing about
No.
the way your body is
No.
built that says that's a good idea. And now I'm sort of being compelled by the argument that you're really not meant to also be like eating vegetables all of the time, that maybe that was like a scarcity time food, because there's a lot more evidence that we should be eating meat when we can. And so the fact that we're going to be adding our own animal into that equation is it's just terribly exciting. It's so invigorating.
And I'll tell you something else. And so we were talking about trophy hunting a while ago. I've got a couple mounts on the wall. We've got antlers all over the place. I mean, that is our kind of our decor if you want to go that route. And what's incredible, I've got a turkey fan on the wall that largest wild turkey ever killed on my dad's property, and it was a week before my grandmother passed away. Okay? She had Alzheimer's. It was awful. I can look at that fan, and I can remember the moment, the entire day. We left one area. I was hunting with my grandfather because he was worried about her and wanted to get home to make sure she wasn't trying to get out of the house or anything like that. So I went to my dad's. So there's that aspect. I can look at everything on the wall or in a picture and remember the moment. The next thing, though, and this is why I wanted to tell the story, is that when you pull out that roast or that tenderloin and you eat it or you prepare it, you're going to remember the moment. We have so many packages of roast, and some of that we may do ourselves, or we'll have a processor do it because we're hunting all over the place. That wrapping, or that I know, okay, that was Justin's buck or that was Jack's buck, and I remember the moment and where we were and the temperature and the smell of the woods and the whole 9 yards, and you get to relive that over and over and over and over and over. We went fishing Bennett Springs for a little family vacation. Same exact thing. We took some trout home, prepared them about a week later, and you could remember being on that stream together. That is the connection to the food that I'm excited for you to experience, because it is so much different than going down and buying hamburger at the grocery store.
Yeah, there's a memory connected with it. Not just a memory, but there's almost a commitment connected to it. I feel like I've had friends give us wild game before, and I think it's delicious, but I don't have that. I don't have any emotional connection to that. I think my guess is, and maybe I'll inform the podcast people when I find out for sure, is that when you eat that meat, you go, oh, wow, I have a responsibility to live very well today because that animal gave something to me. And I think it's certainly the way I should feel every time I eat a piece of ground beef that I got from Force of Nature or from the store.
Sure.
But I don't, because I don't have any connection to it. It's just slimy pink stuff that I pop in a pan. It's really good and good for me, and I can think about all those things, but I don't really think about that cow and its story and that moment. I wonder if there's something there even that's sort of the fact that it's etched in so hard as a memory when you're eating that or when you see those antlers, or meant to feel.
And I'll tell you this much. So, part of the wild game experience is also sharing it with family and friends. It really is. But, like for example, if I was bestow is the word that's coming. If I come to you with wild game,
please do, by the way.
It's an honor. I'm giving you this, do you know, because some people don't grasp that concept of how many hours it took to procure that.
Right.
I didn't go to the store. I mean, that might have been weeks and weeks and weeks of tracking, trailing, months. And when I say bestow, it's because it meant something to me, and I want you to have a piece of this, When you eat that, it's a piece of meat, but that's also the clover that we planted and sweated all summer long to get going out there. That's part of that, or those acorns, or all of it is kind of compartmentalized into that piece of protein that I just gave you. And I want you to enjoy it. I want you to savor it. I want you, and there's not the same connection, because I've had people give me, I know what you're talking about. They give it, here's this, and it's like, okay, that's
you're
great.
You're excited. You're like, this is so healthy. This is great. So healthy.
But when you do it yourself, it's going to take on an entirely new meaning. And when you invite friends and family over into the RV and you're like, hey, look what we just made here, you're going to be excited, because you're doing exactly what I'm telling you is going to happen, is that you're going to want to share that with them and the experience. And if you watch Ranella, especially like on Media, like the actual show, not the podcast, one of the reasons I love that show and resonated with it so much was because it wasn't about selling a product or the actual kill. It was about preparing the food. It was about the story. It was about what came after, and that's what I think is why that particular show is always and will always be one of my favorites. It's what I brought my kids growing up on watching because I'm like, watch this. In my opinion, this is the right way that you do it because there is that connection. And so some of the shows that he's done that I love the most is like the holiday ones where he'll go back and he'll replay the kill and what they did, and then he's preparing that for his guests coming over, and there's always a story, and it's you think about way back when I told you that we're sitting here because someone hunted.
Right.
Think about the tribes, whatever people, indigenous, where it doesn't matter. Pick a part of the globe. They celebrated around a fire and they danced, and it was awesome. And so going back to what we said initially, how can you kill that? Well, you should feel remorse. You should feel sad. You just took a life. And if you don't, then maybe there is something wrong with you. But at that other moment, after you've given thanks for that animal's life and what it's getting ready to do for you, now you can celebrate that and honor it. And that's why I use the word bestow when I say that. I don't want someone to take this and be like, I don't like it and pitch it. That would crush me to know that. And I usually ask that question. Do you like venison?
Right.
And will you use this? And if the answer is yes, then here.
Right.
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't realized just what foodies the hunting community really is. That took me by surprise. But I mean, Ranella is a real treasure of a person because I think he's able to do the thing that all of us want to be able to do, which is to somehow take all of the philosophy of hunting and put it in a great sentence and make it make sense to people who like it and who don't like it. He's such a great representation of that. But what I'm always surprised by is just how often, like on the podcast, where it's a little more casual, the conversation devolves into preparing meat. You know, all the different ways you can cook it, and like, now you need to cook it like that in a pressure cooker with and then you need to roast it after that. And he's so specific about all those things. But again, I think that's sort of the I think nose to tail would kind of be one of the phrases to explain that it's when you kill that animal, you want every part of it. You want to make use of whatever you can, and that there are ways to do that, and that there is very little on an animal that we can't make use of. It's fascinating.
It is. It truly is.
Even it's just there's such a connection when you look at a white-tailed deer and how its leg goes around its rib cage. It's almost like it's going right here, exactly right here, and this is the nicest way to kill me. Yeah. And it's just absolutely fascinating.
It is. And I mean, when you get into the process of, skinning it out and you see how the musculature is connected, and then once you get good at it, how it really does come apart in pieces. I mean, whether you subscribe to this or not, God knew what he was doing when he put this stuff together, because it really is, almost a paint by numbers scenario once you start to learn how to do this stuff. Teaching my son how to fillet a fish, or to breast a turkey out. I mean, these things, it's nature's amazing. Yeah, it just is.
And it's just so clear that we can eat every part of that.
Yeah,
it's just so clear that we have ways to eat every part of that, even down to the bones and making a bone broth.
I never get tired of talking about this stuff.
Ever. It's awesome. Yeah. Well, now I'm just deep in thoughts of. See, this is a big problem for me lately. Is that I'm like I just have so much I'm so full of empty anticipation and excitement, and I'm just imagination for this stuff.
Well, how long do we have? When's the trip up to, you said Wisconsin?
Yeah, it's going to be very start of November.
Okay.
It's like first week of November, I think, is when we're going out. And so I've got a little time to prepare.
Sure.
But yeah, I would love, your advice for things I should be working on. I'm certainly trying. I'm out there every day. I'm working on taking shots, standing, kneeling, sitting at a ton of different distances, way further than I need to. Do my best to stay in shape and to use good form. I'm carrying all my gear with me, all my bags every time, even though I hate that, especially in Missouri right now. It's so humid, but I'm like, throw on the big backpack. Let's do it. What else should I be looking at?
I would find, and there are ranges where you can shoot elevated, because if you're going to be hunting out of a tree stand, that's important.
I think I'm not actually going to be shooting out of a tree stand.
Okay.
That's what I do know. Because
more ground blind.
Because it's going to be 3 of us.
Okay.
So I actually think we're doing like just a normal still hunt.
That's fine.
Which I'm intimidated
by. If they do, you're going to want to practice that, because there's different, the angles. I've watched people hit deer but not hit the vitals because of the steep, the arrow came down at a different angle. So that's something I would look at right there. I'll
still work on that, by the way, even if we don't end up doing it this time.
I think one lesson that a good friend of mine talked about, and he's absolutely correct on this, is that, and I've talked to my son about this on numerous occasions. First off, my son last year was his first time archery, and he didn't tag with his bow. He tagged with a rifle. He would not shoot a doe. And I'm like, why don't you want to shoot a doe? I want a buck. I'm like, you need to shoot a doe. And then my buddy said, Jack, you need to shoot a doe. And then 3 or 4 other friends said, you need to shoot a doe, because everybody wants the big antlers. But when those big antlers walk out and the shakes start, so my point is, if you're shooting, and let's say you're grouping in a dessert plate, okay? Well, that's the size of a deer heart. You will kill a deer if you hit it inside of that. But when a deer walks out in bow range and you feel your heart rate and breath start to go, which is another reason why being physically fit is important, because if you can get your breath under control or calm at that particular point, because it doesn't matter, this is going to excite you. But if you're hitting a dessert plate at 20 yards like this without any adverse effects, heart rate, wind, temperature, even the clothing that you wear, expect that that's going to expand when that whitetail steps out the first time. So the reason they say is, in practice, to get those groupings as tight as you can, is because when the moment of truth hits, there's probably going to be a little bit of, maybe not, maybe you drill it right where you need it to be. But I thought that is the best example, because as I'm standing here on a bow range with my feet flat and just taking all the time in the world, I need to make sure that my accuracy is better, and I'm working on getting tighter and tighter and tighter, because, it doesn't matter the size of buck. This is your first time out. First off, any deer with a bow is a trophy, because that's, unless you're going to throw a spear at it, I think that's one of the hardest things that you can do is to take an animal in that capacity. But understand that the adrenaline and your heart rate and all those emotions and everything, that primal feeling I talked about, it's all going to be right there. Now, you do this long enough, you're still going to have all those things. But it's almost like, you see it in movies all the time, like the slow motion starts. Everything slows down.
Yeah.
And it's like you get zeroed in, and then it's like it's going to happen. Sometimes you still miss. But that's a maturation process, my friend. But, for now, if you feel like your groups are getting tight, continue to work on getting them tighter.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing right there. And then I was laughing a while ago when you talked about all the gear. Man, there's so much gear you can buy.
Yeah.
There's a ton of it. I think that really at the end of the day, where I would place the majority of definitely you want to make sure your archery tackle is in good working condition. I think it comes down to playing in the wind. And I didn't always do that early on. I think a lot of people I'll just go in here. Deer can smell really, really well. So if you're trying to go into an area where the wind is going to be blowing right back into where they're bedded, be prepared to not see many deer, because they can smell you, but you're scent control, and there are 1,001 scent control products that will say scent elimination. You can never eliminate human scent, but you can, so making sure, the laundry, I keep my clothes after I've washed them. I will use either like an ozone generator to kind of blast that smell out, or keep them in like a tub. And I'll even go so far as to take like leaves and pine needles and stuff like that, because I want my stuff smelling just like the outdoor smells.
Wow.
So, there's all, there's sprays and there's gels and there's this and that. I'm like, you know what? Can you shoot your bow? Can you get to where you need to get to without intrusion? So what I mean by that is, can you get to your stand or your blind or where you're going to hunt without them finding you or seeing you or smelling you? And then can you get out afterwards? Because if you're going to go back to that same spot again, if they're seeing you climb down out of a stand or walk out, they may not sit there and necessarily say, that guy wants to shoot me. But they're going to start thinking, that's not right. That wasn't there yesterday.
Right.
And so what happens, and I've had this argument for years, well, the deer don't mind. Tell me what that's like in 3 weeks if you keep doing that, because all of a sudden they're going to be hunting, and I've done it myself. Man, there were deer all over this place. Where are they at? The deer have learned that you've been there, and now they'll still come. But they're going to come at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. They become nocturnal, or they're nocturnal anyway. But that's the point. Is you're trying to capture them in a moment where they have no idea you're there. So you want to be a ghost if you can. That's ultimately what I want you to be thinking about, is how stealthy can you become. And I'll take it right back to the fitness side of things. We do agility training with people, or balance training. Why? because as you're trying to traverse rocky terrain or you're stepping over logs and whatnot, I don't want you falling, crashing, and banging on the ground and making a whole bunch of noise. Climbing a tree stand, I want you like a cat. I need you to be, and that comes with physical training. You'll the balance training that you'll do through your jiu-jitsu. I would think would parallel beautifully to hiking in the woods.
I think it makes you a lot more open with your body for sure.
Absolutely.
A lot less uncomfortable. Like I'm not nearly as stiff. I'm not bothered. I don't have like taboos about like doing anything with my body.
Yeah.
Once you bear walk across the, mats a few times with other people, you're like, all right, this is what it looks like when you bear walk. But when you talk about like the sort of that adrenaline spike, I think that's partly the part that I still need to work on. And it's hard to get myself to do it here because usually when I'm out there, I don't want to be any hotter than I am.
Sure.
Like I'm not going to start doing jumping jacks, but I know that that's a strategy that a lot of people do is do 100 jumping jacks and then, try to line up your shot. Do you subscribe to anything like that?
Yeah, we do. And so like, for example, I mean, there's a couple things that we can do from a training perspective that, helps to simulate. Now you got to understand.
Sorry for the water bottle.
Squeak, squeak, squeak. I think you got to understand that even like with specific rowing motions, you can't 100% mimic pulling a bow back. I mean, we can do rows, cable rows, dumbbell rows, shoulder work, rotator cuff work, and that's all going to be good. It's going to help you draw. So that's important. I need you strong enough to whether you're in a blind or whether you're in a stand that you can draw your bow without, because people that have too much poundage on there or they're not strong enough, they're sitting there and they're moving all around. A deer is going to notice that movement. You need to be able to draw seamlessly. There's one. Simulating what you're talking about right now, you could do mountain climbers, you could do burpees, you could do jumping jacks, doesn't matter. And then shoot 3 arrows. Okay? Right. Now, I want to make the disclaimer here. You can post-production, put something underneath my be safe. I don't want you so gassed that you're sitting there and you're like, oh, and arrows are flying to the right and left. But, I mean, you can do things like that. I mean, you're certainly not going to do burpees to the point where you're going to pass out. But, get your heart rate up and try that. Another aspect, and I think you've already alluded to this, is shooting different, you're seated.
Yeah,
kneeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is it that you never, like, I've been on so many archery ranges at this point. I've been the only guy that's kneeled ever.
They don't think about it.
Yeah.
They don't think about it. But my point is, I've got a guy right now who I'm training to go out west. It's an elk hunt, and it's muzzleloader hunt, which is kind of cool. What we've done with him is we've taken a PVC pipe and tied a string to it and put a small weight on the end of it. We'll do X amount of movements, and then I'll have him either stand or kneel, with a PVC pipe and hold 30 seconds, 60 seconds, whatnot, because we're training the shoulder muscles and the core to be able to do that. You can do the same thing with a bow. I mean, that's an actual drill next time you're out there, because what happens if you draw and that deer decides, I'm going to stop behind this oak tree?
Yeah.
And you can't let go. I mean, you can't come down, or else they're going to see you. So now, hold that 20 seconds and work up to it. Maybe you start with 10 seconds and then you fire. Maybe the point is that you're training your body, your mind, your muscles to do things that aren't what you just described, which is standing flat-footed at a range and just firing arrows down there. Because that's great if you're target shooting, but in reality, you've got tree limbs you're going to have to move. I mean, there are so many aspects to it. I always thought bow hunting, you watch it on TV, well, it's post-production editing. They climb in a stand, and 30 seconds later, a monster buck walks out and they shoot it.
Right.
And I remember the first time, because I didn't get into bow hunting until I was like 35 years old. I'm late to the game in that aspect. Hunted all my life, but bow hunting, not so much. And I was at my dad's farm, and I was sitting in a tree stand, and a doe walks out, and she's probably, 12 yards. And I've got the bow down. I'm sitting right here, and I start to draw, and she just looks at me and bolts. And I didn't even get it to here. And at that point, I thought to myself, boy, this is a lot harder than that looks on TV. And sure enough, it is. I mean, because with a rifle, you can extend your reach a tad bit. With archery, it's a lot of times up close and personal. And, you will always be faced with having to make quick decisions, ethical decisions, safe decisions. With archery, it's amazing how, when I say you got to think about it, again, in your mind, it may seem like you've thought about it for an hour. Everything slows down, but in reality, it may have been 3 seconds. Am I going to take this animal? Am I not going to take this animal? Because that window period of where they're coming down that ridge and you have an open lane, you got to make that choice pretty fast, whether you are or you aren't. And that's when, like I said, if you make that decision and you start to feel that, again, I wish I could like give it to you in like a lotion or something, that primal feeling, just try this out, you're going to love this. That's where this stuff takes over. And man, I hope you got to text me the moment it happens, because I want to know what it felt. I want you in your words to what it felt like, because I'm going to bet $100 that it's exactly what I'm describing right now.
Hopefully there's a video of it,
Ooh,
of my immediate reaction.
Even better. Yeah.
Hopefully I do not weep, but it's possible.
I've been with folks that have done it, and I'll tell you what, that tells me right there that all the emotions that we've discussed over our time together is what we want it to be.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Well, it's something that you should be probably experiencing your whole life, and you shouldn't be 26 when you go try this for the first time, probably, in terms of what we're built for. So
I'm excited you're doing it. That's the best part.
I'm very excited.
Yeah.
I'm nervous, but you've given me some confidence, because I have been practicing a lot of the things that you've been mentioning, and practicing holding the draws and just working on all those things, because I get it, and I'm generally good at understanding the theoretical and applying it to the practical, and hopefully that pays off for me on this one. But there's a whole lot of luck in this too.
There's always luck involved when this happens. Yeah. But here's what I will tell you, and I don't know how long you have to go. If it's a week, if it's 3 days. What I have always found, and to be perfectly honest, it's this is the good life lesson here. So I co-authored a book on personal training and marketing 10 years ago. No one came to me and said, "You're smart enough to write a book, go do it." I talked with someone and I said, "I've got an idea." We pitched it to a publisher. They bought it. Now, mind you, I didn't make $1 million off that book, but the point is I did it. No one said, "You're smart enough to start a company." No one in my life, no one has said, you go do it. And you do it out of passion, persistence, resilience. And what I have found is that the people who are willing to put in the work in the woods, just like you would in your job or your relationships, if you spend enough time there, you will make your own luck. Now, granted, if you're only going to go out one afternoon and deer have been there every day on camera, that could be the day they decide they're going to get there a little bit later. That is hunting, as is life.
Yeah.
But if you keep going back to that spot and you apply the principles like we talked about, you're playing the wind, you're working on your scent control, your access, getting in and out, your scouting, I love, Mark and Terry Drury of Drury Outdoors. They've said this before. You can't hunt a buck that's not there. Meaning that, I'm going to go out and hunt, but I mean, what animals are on your property? And in public hunting, sometimes it's hard to gauge, but there's still a scouting element to it. Is there deer sign? Are there droppings? Are there tree rubs? Are you seeing scrapes? All these things matter. Is there a good food source, water, bedding? Look at the topo maps. What are they telling you? All of these things are part of the experience. The moment of truth, whether you release that arrow or pull that trigger, is this. It's a millisecond.
Mm-hmm.
I've been working on our property since January of this year. Well, truthfully, for the last 2 years. But, we got back into it right after duck season, and I've been working. And I'm not up there every weekend. It's about a 90-minute drive from where I live. But, the last few months, if we're not out fishing or something, we're up there doing something related. So everything that I've done, and then you come back into my workouts in the gym or my mental preparedness or, like you said, watching YouTube videos, everything that I'm doing is preparing for that moment. And that moment's awesome. But love what you're doing right now, because that journey, the story that you're about to tell or experience, even what we're doing here right now, is going to be part of your overall experience. And you'll remember this. You'll sit back and you'll think, this conversation or that time on the range or what I learned here. And that's what makes it sweet. If it was easy, it wouldn't be any fun. This is hard stuff. Anyone can walk out and get lucky on day one, and a lot of people will. You might walk out and be in the stand 10 minutes. It's happened. Or you may hunt from sunup till sundown for 5 days in a row, about to the point where you're like, I'm going to quit, but you don't quit, and at the last moment, a buck walks out and you arrow it, and you've got enough meat for your family for the next year. That's a pretty incredible experience right there, because the lessons that it parallels into your own life, it's indescribable.
Yeah. Couldn't have put it better myself. Yeah. I mean, you're summing up all the things that we want out of this and are looking for out of this. And I am excited that we're going to be, telling that story and sharing that story with other people. If it helps somebody else do this and be excited about it, or even just to consider that maybe this is this is an interesting thing.
Right.
Then I think we've done our job. But yeah, I think you're right. Like, there's no waiting for someone to give you permission for any of this stuff. And if you act like it's impossible to prepare for this, then you're missing all of the opportunities we have. We are in the time where there may be less hunting lands now than say, 50,000 years ago. But there's certainly more information to make you a better hunter, and it's available, and it's free, and it's online, and it's wherever, and it's people like you, and it's podcasts, and it's shows, and books, and archery ranges that are free to the public. Love that. And so you can't really act like you don't have the ability to handle the preparation side of this, and I think that's what we're trying to do. That's the whole point. This has been a lot of fun.
I appreciate this. This has been great.
Yeah. You've been a fantastic guest. Thanks for coming on the show. I'd love to have you back on the show sometime. I know we'll be back in St. Louis, so I gotta get you back on, and hopefully at that time we will be swapping hunting stories.
We'll wrap it up. Yeah,
thing.
We'll put the bow on this one. Yeah.
But it's just part one, people. So Jeremy, thanks for being on the show. Tell people where they can find you online so they can get all your handles. And
So if you want to get a good understanding of everything we do, I would say the website at stayfittohunt.com, and it's stay FITTO, not to, so TOHUNT, or just Fit to Hunt Official on Facebook or Instagram. You can find us on YouTube, and I would encourage people just to give us a follow for no other reason, I should say, than the content that we're putting out there. We try to do a lot of thought-provoking, like we talked about before, more than just a strength train or cardio or nutrition. We want to do stuff that's really going to resonate with people and help them both physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, you name it. And we want to have a little fun in the aspect too. So that's the fun stuff right there.
Nice.
Yep.
I'm going to have Andrew take some pictures of us before we end this thing. As always, people, I will put photos out on Instagram and all the places, and you'll have websites and links in the podcast description. And, of course, that's always on my feed at @THicksonLife. Follow Wild Hicksons, because we're going to be having all of our hunting adventures coming soon, which we're crazy excited about. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. As always, everybody, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Thanks to my guest, Jeremy. And we will see you on the next episode.